Everybody, sit around the campfire, okay? It's story time. Story time. Hold on, let's see if we can... How hard would it be for me to make my own TTS? Let's have a look. This is the wrong playlist. Let me see. Make your own. Oh, God. How do I make my own? Hold on, I'm gonna see if I can do this. Please switch on accent support. Wait, oh, the default is US English accent? Are you shitting me? The fuck? I've got to read a script. Oh my god. Maybe. Hold on. How long does this take? Should we do this? I don't know whether we should do this. This could be dangerous. You know what? Let's just read it. This is gonna take too long because I don't want to do this right now. Let me get the. Okay, it's fanfic time. Let's find it. It is here. Okay, what's this? Who's this by? How do I know? How do I know? Oh, it's by Liz. Okay. Okay. I kind of want to do the TTS because I'm looking through this that it could be really interesting. Well, I didn't say Gliz this time. Listen, Gliz is a better name, okay, than Liz. Okay, yeah. Gliz is better. Okay, and you can't disagree with me. Okay, here we go. So this is by Liz in chat, and this is a prayer for which no words exist. Okay, yeah. Which bit am I reading? Oh, this is for a newspaper. Okay, so this. Oh shit. Okay, so this is Saturday, March 14th, 1846. Okay, the London Telegraph. Wanted. It says wanted. Assistant to the study of human anatomy needed at the University of Oxford. Job includes working alongside leading doctors to further scientific understanding of the human body. Inquiries are to be sent to Dr. Richard Dark, University of Oxford at Christchurch College. Oh my god, Richard's a doctor. Okay. Okay, wait, there's a letter. Okay. All right, I'm invested. To Dr. Richard Dark. From New York, March 14th, 1846. Glizzy is the name for a hot dog. Sorry, I'm interrupting. I hope that this letter finds you in good health. I am writing to you in accordance with the advertisement that was published in the London Telegraph. I feel as though we have a similar attitude in regard to the studies of the anatomical structure of the human body, and I'm interested in working alongside you in the pursuit of further knowledge surrounding this topic. Attached is a list of my publications and certificates that I currently hold, should you desire to investigate the qualifications that I hold for a study such as yours. Do not hesitate to inquire further if you should wish. I am more than happy to share my ideas with a man such as yourself. Regards, Matt Rhodes, United States of America. Okay. Then Richard replies, Jesus Christ. 15 days later, I suppose that's pretty accurate for the time. You will be pleased to know that your letter found me in good faith. After careful consideration, I found that you are an ideal candidate to assist in my studies. Your research is thought-provoking in the best possible way, and I am intrigued by further ideas that you may pursue at the University of Oxford. I request your presence in Oxford no later than May 20th. Oh my god, so demanding. Someone should be awaiting you at the Port of London to bring you to my lab so that we may get acquainted. Encloses a cost of £10, which shall cover the costs of the journey, alongside a list of items which you shall find useful upon your arrival. Safe travels, Richard Dark. May 20th, 1846. Here we go. Those were the letters. The stacks of paper on his desk were yet to be sorted. They'd been sitting there for weeks. By that point, most of the papers consisted of unmarked essays and formal invitations to places that he didn't particularly care for, from people whose names he couldn't quite recall. A myriad of his less important notes were hidden between the pages. If he looked properly, he'd probably find a few missing fountain pens, maybe a dried up ink pad or two. The rest of the room was filled with a variety of specimens in jars, skeletons hanging from thin wires on metal frames, empty vials and beakers lying on any surface that was free, drawings of human anatomy pinned to any and every wall that was available. Books were piled up in front of the windows, some novels and other publications from colleagues who had come and gone. The bin beside his desk was overflowing with papers that had been discarded, hundreds of theories and drawings tossed aside for one reason or another. He didn't really care to look through them. They were thrown for a reason, and he didn't particularly have time to go scavenging through the pile to find something that was even semi-decent. The clock behind his desk ticked incessantly. Matt sat behind Richard's desk, a pile of letters in his hands. He was leaning back in Richard's seat, a fountain pen tucked behind his ear, the top few buttons of his shirt undone. Oh, his tie loose around his neck. He looked tired, which Richard considered to be normal after traveling so far. The dark circles between his eyes confirmed as much. Despite that, he continued to sort the letters as though he'd known Richard for a lifetime instead of a handful of hours. They met one another outside of the university just as dawn broke over London. Matt carried a brown suitcase in his left hand and an umbrella in his right, despite the fact that not a single cloud in the sky indicated rain. Can this bloody siren shut up? Thank you. Every word he'd spoken had been drowning in an air of excitement and curiosity. Every other sentence was a question. Every other breath was hinted with the edges of words that he seemed unable to say. He settled in quickly after the short tour ended, leaving his belongings in Richard's office, and making himself busy with sorting through the things that Richard had simply intended on leaving until they became too much of a problem. Let me have a sip of my tea. Why do you have a letter for Dr. P? Matt glanced at Richard, a thin frown drawn on his face. He held the letter up high above his head. Richard looked up from his notes and squinted. They sometimes get mistaken when they're delivering the letters. It's normal for me to end up with other people's posts. What's the twist here? I'm looking for it. I can't find it yet. Matt waved it around, so that helped Richard read it from the other side of the room. Do you want me to deliver it? No, Richard shook his head at that. Pred was never one to read letters addressed to him. Pred was never one to read at all, if Richard really thought about it. Bring it here. The only chance of it being read is if I open it and deliver it myself. He's a lazy man. Wait, Pred's in here? Matt stood up and padded over to where Richard was writing. The letter still clutched in his hands as though it would fly away if he let his grip lessen for even a second. That's impressive. That's one word for it, Dark said, turning back to his notes. His pen scratched against paper as he wrote. Matt hummed and sat down opposite Richard. He placed the letter on the table and looked around the room again. Richard offered him a glance before turning back to the disaster of a table that he'd been sitting at for longer than he cared to admit. The jar before him contained a brain. Is it Pred's brain? Is it really tiny? There wasn't much for him to study that hadn't already been observed, but it was intriguing nonetheless. It was well preserved, and Richard could see every little detail that he would normally have had to refer to a book to witness. It was far more interesting in the real world than it was on paper. He looked closer, squinting as though it would give him a better angle of the subject. He'd already examined it to its full extent, but there was something screaming at him, telling him that he'd missed something during the few days that he'd been watching over it. He shook his head. Ridiculous. Matt looked at the notes and then Richard with a raised brow. He took the papers and turned them so he could read them without having to arch his neck. Before Richard could take the papers back, Matt had taken them into his hands and was shuffling them around as though he knew the exact order that they all belonged in. Richard set his pen down on the desk and turned his attention to the man before him. I have a seminar in half an hour. After that, I believe that my schedule is clear. You can come and watch the process if you'd like. I could always use an extra hand. I'll be there. Matt seemed to relax, and he set Richard's notes back on the table. He reclined in his seat ever so, his arms now... Oh, God, what tea? His arms now resting over his stomach, and his eyes looking Richard up and down as though he were examining him for one reason or another. It looks as if he was reclining at an after party with the late Lord Byron, as opposed to sitting in a lab at Oxford. If he held the thought long enough, Richard could imagine the scenario playing out before him. Matt reclined in a chase lamp. What the fuck is this?
Longue.
A chase longer, a glass of red wine beside him, his eyes locked on the dances taking place on the floor beside him as he engaged in conversations with some of the greatest literary minds about topics that he couldn't care for if he tried. He could imagine politicians standing over the conversations, attempting to give their own input on things that they had no clue about. He could imagine Matt waving people away as he ignored monologue after monologue from people who he'd never cared for. He could imagine Matt wearing his shirt in the same style as he wore it on that day, unbuttoned and his tie loose, his jacket nowhere to be seen, his hair falling ever so slightly out of its style. He shook his head to get the thoughts to leave his mind. He hadn't even known Matt for a day, and his mind was already wandering into the realm of scenarios that would never exist. Ridiculous. You're an awfully casual man. Richard took the envelope from the other side of the desk and began to tear the seal open. He cleared his throat before he continued. For a scientist, that is. I prefer to be comfortable while I work, Matt shrugged. What's going to happen? Something's about to happen. I can feel it in my bones. He looked around the room again, and one of his hands tangled itself in his hair. He caught Richard's eye when he turned back. Is it going to be a problem? Richard glanced down at the envelope, then at Matt. When you see my colleagues, you need to look professional. When it's just us two, I couldn't care less. Matt smiled. He took a breath and stood up, giving the room another look around before he spoke again. I'll get started on something. I got to keep myself busy. Don't break anything. Dart began to pull the letter from the envelope, deciding that he would just give it a quick scan before handing it over to Pred. It was unlikely that his boss... really? His boss would read it regardless of how it was handed to him. Uh-oh. What does that say? Are there 77s? I'm looking at my OBS. I can't read it. Richard tending to know how to handle the more serious matter that Pred refused to touch with a 10-foot pole. Your distrust in my ability wounds me, Richard. Matt rested a hand over his heart, staring that stupid smile. He turned on his heel and started to walk around in search of something that Richard didn't care to ask after. To Dr. K. Pred, London, Newcastle, May 11th, 1846. You'd be pleased to know that I found a suitable provider for our mutual needs, as per our conversation in November last year. The price comes to roughly £20, though I'm confident that we can bring the price down with some persuasion, if you catch my meaning. The provider requires a 2-week notice so that they are able to find an appropriate subject. You will find a point of contact attached. Rest assured, nothing will come back to you. I have covered all possible avenues in that regard. I hope to see you soon so that we may discuss this in person. It's hard to communicate via letter for fear of prying eyes. Write back to me the moment that you receive this so I know that you are still alive. I often worry about your ability to survive on your own. Yours truly, Angel. Newcastle. With a drawn breath, Richard folded the letter back up and pushed it into the pocket of his jacket. It felt as though it were burning a hole in the fabric, like the paper had suddenly caught fire and was slowly eating its way into his skin and burrowing through the muscles so that it could settle in his bones. He had no idea who Angel was or why they worried about Pred's, albeit lackluster, ability to survive on his own, but he didn't know that the contents of the letter concerned him. He supposed that it could have just been correspondence about transporting more specimens from around the country. It was in Pred's nature to be cryptic about things that had no business being cryptic at all. But Richard still decided to keep the letter to himself for the foreseeable future. Pred wouldn't miss it even if he knew that it existed, right? Richard looked back up from the desk to find Matt staring at another jar with narrowed eyes and a furrowed brow. There was a notepad beside him and a fountain pen still tucked behind his right ear, a small ink stain against his cheek for one reason or another. He was yet to fix his clothes to look professional. If anything, he had loosened his tie further in the few minutes that Richard was occupied. "You've got a mark on your face," Richard said. "I know," Matt nodded, not breaking his gaze away from the jar for a single moment. "It's all part of my grand plan. You wouldn't understand." Richard stood up from his seat and cleared his throat again. He didn't question Matt any further on his grand plan, mostly because he didn't want to have to waste space in his brain for whatever theories Matt would come up with to try to justify something that was clearly a mistake. He picked up a few papers and rolled his shoulders back. "You're free to stay here and do whatever you want, as long as you don't break anything. I'll come and get you before I head to surgery." Matt broke contact with the jar and wore a thin smile on his face. He raised his left hand to his temple in an attempt to salute. Richard didn't have the heart to tell him that he was doing it wrong. "I'll guard this through with my life." The end. What's in the jar, sir? What's in the jar, sir? I expected something. What's Pred doing, man? You know what? I bet it's, you know whose brain's in the jar? Kiki Pendragon. That's Kiki's brain. That's my theory. Yep. Good. Liz, as always, 10 out of 10. I expect to see a novel in Warstone soon with Gliz written on the author. Gliz. That was good, as always. I didn't. If you guys want to read more, go in Discord. There's loads there. What the fuck is this? What the fuck just happened? Yeah, maybe it's El Teso's brand. Yeah. Good shit, Liz. Good read. That was a good read. 10 out of 10. So is that the Dark Roads plague? No, it's not Plague Doctor. The Dark Roads, the 19th century Doctor Science Jekyll and Hyde stories. Don't tell me that it's called the Doctor Daddies alternate universe. Please don't tell me that. Do not tell me that. Please tell me it has a better name. Okay, Gliz, it's Victorian Doctor. Okay, thank God. Thank God it's not officially called Doctor Daddies. Oh my God. Victorian Doctor Daddies. God damn it.